Very good evening. You're watching Brass Tacks with me, Akanksha Swaroop. What's unfolding in Bangladesh bears unsettling resemblance to Pakistan and Afghanistan. Here too, false blasphemy accusations have been used to terrorize minorities and silence dissent. And so Bangladesh's interim administration under Mohammad Yunus has failed its acid test. Why so? Because a state that cannot protect its minorities cannot claim moral or democratic legitimacy. Call it Yunus's silence, indecision or appeasement. These are not just failures of Mohammad Yunus, but all of the United States and the wider West. As far as US is concerned, it's a country where Yunus is highly regarded. Perhaps that explains why Washington is overlooking his failures. And that includes its legacy media like the New York Times, which has framed Deepu Das's killing as a generalized pattern of religious intolerance across South Asia. Yes, some US lawmakers have sent a letter to Mohammad Yunus. They've expressed concerns over the total ban on Awami League. And more importantly, US Congressman Thomas Suozzi has raised an alarm over the mob killing of Deepu Chandra Das. That includes the broader threats to religious minorities in Bangladesh. But will this alarm suffice? Given not a word of condemnation on the Hindu genocide has arrived from either the US President himself or his core team. That includes the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, US Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, or even the MAGA favorite Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. Mind you, Vance's wife is a Hindu, while Gabbard is a practicing Hindu. In fact, Donald Trump's tone-deaf policy on Bangladesh and its minorities has raised key critical questions. I put them forward for you. Why has the US State Department failed to designate Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh as a foreign terrorist organization? This, when it is the Jamaat that is responsible for the alarming rise in attacks on minorities, particularly Hindus. Not to forget Bangladesh's surge in Islamic radicalization at the hands of the Jamaatis. Begging the question, what explains the suspension of the Awami League when militant extremist organizations like Jamaat and Ansarullah Bangla team are active? Should Yunus and his regime not be tried at the International Criminal Court for Hindu genocide? And will Yunus' regime take responsibility for the 144 jihadist militants that they released from prisons as Yunus took over in August of 2024? These jihadists belong to ABT, JMB and the Hizb-ut-Tahrir, all directly affiliated to either the ISIS or Al-Qaeda. So the question is, why is US sitting like a mute spectator? The same Washington which proclaims to be the messiah of human rights and democracy is now feigning ignorance on Dhaka. In fact, even before Sergio Gore has donned his principal hat as ambassador to India, he has already turned active as special envoy to South and Central Asia. A day ago, Gore not only congratulated Professor Yunus for his trade and tariff negotiations, but also discussed the funeral of Usman Hadi. Yet, no word of condemnation on the killing of Deepu Chandra Das. Why? Bringing us to the big question. Has the burning of Bangladesh's conscience exposed the US hypocrisy? Anarchy is ruling the roost in Bangladesh. The questions that are being raised about the Yunus regime's tolerance, if not tacit support for radical groups, and here's why so. The Islamist leader and India hater Usman Hadi has been in fact given the status of a shaheed. There was a state honor accorded to him and a day of national mourning was declared for Hadi. There was public display of ISIS flags during Hadi's funeral, yet no Western condemnation. Unabated attacks on Hindus, other minorities are only rising with impunity. Media channel buildings have been burned down by mobs. Radicals are demanding sacking of global TV journalists. All of this, of course, begs the question, what is the Western community doing about it? Yunus is, of course, under pressure both internally and from world powers, or at least some of them. A group of influential US lawmakers have urged Bangladesh's interim government to ensure the election in February and ensure that it is free, fair and inclusive. In fact, in a letter to Chief Advisor Mohammad Yunus, US Representatives Gregory Meeks, Bill Huizenga and Sydney Kamlagar Dove warned that banning an entire political party could in fact disenfranchise a large section of voters. The lawmakers said freedom of association and individual criminal responsibility are fundamental human rights, cautioning that suspending party activities or reviving the flawed International Crimes Tribunal could even undermine democratic credibility. They've called on the interim government or a future elected administration to revisit this decision to ban the Awami League as Bangladesh now prepares for its first election since the fall of the previous government. Following Hadi's death, the US Embassy in Bangladesh issued a condolence message. In fact, it stated that the US Embassy joins the people of Bangladesh in mourning the loss of youth leader Sharif Usman Hadi and offers deepest condolences to his family, friends and supporters. The French Embassy in Bangladesh expressed deep sorrow at the death of Sharif Usman Hadi, strongly condemning all forms of political violence and extending heartfelt condolences to his family, friends and supporters. This one is particularly shocking given that France is a time-tested ally to India. But that's not all. The European Union mission in Bangladesh said they were deeply saddened by the death of Hadi and extended their sincere condolences to his family, friends and all those affected. Mind you, it is his very family members, like his sister, who are spewing venom against India. Messages of condolences were posted by the German and French missions, aligning with the broader Western diplomatic response, condemning the killing and urging accountability. But while they all mourned the death of a radical anti-India student leader, not a word from any of them on the persecution of minorities under Yunus's watch. And that's what we are going to now deep dive into. For that, let me introduce my esteemed guests today. I'm joined in by the former diplomat and Chief Information Commissioner, Yash Sinha. Thank you so much for joining in. I can see I'm also joined in by Shoaib Chaudhry, who's a renowned Bangladeshi journalist, also joined in by Adele Nazarian, who's a senior fellow at the Gold Institute for International Strategy. Thank you so much for joining in, all of you. Adele, perhaps you can help me understand better this kind of mute spectator approach, or rather is this a deliberate silence being feigned by not just the State Department, the US President himself, who is in fact always taken a stand for when it comes to, say, the rights of the minorities, the killings of the innocent. Most recently, he's always been very active on anti-Semitism. What explains this strategic silence when it comes to the unabated attacks on the Hindus and the minorities in Bangladesh?
Well, there's absolutely no way to hide anymore, if they were trying to, that Hindus are absolutely being targeted with hell and with fury in Bangladesh, and it's only getting worse. I think right now the State Department and the Trump administration is doing, the White House is assessing the situation at hand. You have to keep in mind, there's about 270,000 to 300,000 people in the US identifying as Bangladeshi alone. And of that group, roughly 71% were immigrants. So make it about 190,000 Bangladeshi individuals who immigrated to the US. It is unclear what their ideological alliances are. But I can tell you, based on conversations that I've had, quite a few of them were actually not supporting Sheikh Hasina, who is the former prime minister, who was forced out by the former administration. I think anyone who's familiar with the situation knows this. So I think there's a lot of due diligence that is being done, a lot of cautionary, attention into what sort of wording should be used regarding this. Elections are upcoming in 2026 in February, unless they get pushed back further. But I think Muhammad Yunus is very well known, let's say, in Western circles. And the only thing that I can say needs to be done at this point is, I think it's critically important that not only, and I'm sure it's going to happen, that the State Department, the US government unequivocally condemns the lynching of Hindu Dipu Chandra Das, Bangladeshi Hindu, and they have to also formally designate Jamaat-e-Islami as a terrorist or terrorist-adjacent organization under the US law. I'm not saying Jamaat-e-Islami was directly behind this, but I can tell you that even though it wasn't, there's no, confirmed evidence that JEI was part of this lynching bears all the unmistakable hallmarks of an Islamic mob violence, the same sort of violence we saw that was carried out by JEI during Sheikh Hasina's leading up to her elections, and ultimately which pushed her out of the country. And I can guarantee you this is only going to get worse. And it's not, look, any of us here could be targets. If someone says something, a mere rumor that has been unsubstantiated, unconfirmed, it doesn't take more than a mob that is radicalized to come in and try to kill anyone who speaks out, even if it's not even
Okay.
substantiated.
Ambassador Yash Sinha, they were silent when Chinmoy Krishna Das was arrested. They are silent when Deepu Das has been brutally murdered. He's been mob lynched, he's been burnt. And this is just part of the series of persecution that's been taking place, a genocide rather directed towards the Hindus. Even if one were to go by the fact that they are not supportive of Sheikh Hasina, but does that justify the unabated killings against the Hindus, the minorities, and the free hand being given to the radicals, the support being given to Jamaat or say the ABT? Many of them have direct linkages with the Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
Thank you, Kacha, for having me on your show. Why am I not surprised? Because the Western hypocrisy on this is very blatant. It's very apparent. We're aware of the forces behind the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, and I don't want to get into that. But the fact of the matter is that a gentleman was paradropped as chief advisor, and his statements right from the beginning are very clear. And I remember his appearance in New York with Presidents Clinton and Obama and Mrs. Hillary Clinton. So, I mean, it's very clear. We don't really need to go on about it. But the fact of the matter is that when a person like Hadi is killed, the U.S. Embassy issues a condolence note. Fair enough. I mean, it's their right to issue a condolence note in their official handle. But the French and German embassies to fly their flags at half-mast, I was very surprised because there are certain diplomatic practices that govern a national flag flying at half-mast. But be that as it may, I think it only brings out the double standards that they have. If they choose to ignore the attacks on minorities in India. I mean, today I was reading the New York Times, for instance,
Yes,
that talked about Deepu Das, and then they compared it, or at least drew a parallel with some poor gentleman being mistaken for a Bangladeshi in Kerala and being set upon. So, I mean, that is the sort of biases that they work in, and we are well aware of that. But I think what is happening is far more concerning to us because we live in the region. Our neighborhood is extremely unstable at present, and what's happening in Bangladesh is a matter of deep concern, especially when you have jihadi forces meddling and jihadi forces actually taking control. In fact, I just read today that the brother of Usman Hadi actually blamed Muhammad Yunus for the killing of his brother. So I think the situation, it's the rule of mobocracy, it's the rule of the mob, it's no more the rule of law. And I think this is a matter that should concern everybody, not just Bangladesh's neighbors.
All right, Shoaib, I want to quickly come to you. When you talk about the kind of mobocracy that's taking place in Bangladesh, why shouldn't, say, a Jamaat-e-Islami or even the ABT, all of them be designated as foreign terrorist organizations by the US State Department? And from your understanding, you've been studying Muhammad Yunus very closely. Perhaps you can enlighten us why this is not happening and why is this soft, what explains this soft approach towards Muhammad Yunus?
Thank you very much, Akanksha. You see, the reason behind the silence of the US Embassy and the United Nations about the gruesome murder of Tipu Chandradas and attacks on Hindu in Bangladesh, just let me explain to you or bring to you one instance example. Hours ago, Shahidul Alam, he is projected as a prominent photographer and a key aide of Muhammad Yunus, with whom Yunus met Alexander Soros in September 2024. So Shahidul Alam published a post on Facebook stating that Deepu Chandra Das's murder is the reason behind people's anger against Awami League. This is the interpretation Yunus wants to project. This is the interpretation Yunus wants to use to mislead the international community that Deepu Chandra is also a victim of people's anger against Sheikh Hasina and Awami League, which is absolutely false and a blatant lie. Now, as Ambassador Sinha also explained, that this scenario, you see, I should say this is Americans and the United Nations, they are coming with a selective statement. Because if you remember Volker Turk, the UN official, he issued many statements and he even told BBC that he facilitated the jihadist coup of 2024 by exerting pressure and threatening the armed forces of Bangladesh. So UN, United States, US deep state, George Soros, and all other individuals and figures who are behind jihadist coup and the so-called regime change in many countries in the world, they are the culprits actually. They are behind what is happening to my country. And Dipu Chandra's murder, I would say, by not mentioning the case of Dipu Chandra Das, the US administration, the United Nations, they have proved that they are also one of those perpetrators of this crime. And I absolutely agree with you. Yunus should be brought to the International Criminal Court along with his jihadist Islamist cabal.
All right, stay with me because we also have a reaction of Hadi's brother, and it's important to hear how betrayed Hadi and his entire family, friends, and in fact the entire student wing that he hailed from feels at the moment, because it is this very student wing that was in fact used by Muhammad Yunus and the larger forces at play, mainly the radicals, to ensure the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. Let's in fact listen in to what Usman Hadi's brothers had to say.
আপনারাই ওসমান হাদিকে হত্যা করিয়েছেন, আবার আপনারাই এটাকে ইস্যু করে নির্বাচন বানচাল করার চেষ্টা করতেছেন। আপনারা যারা রাষ্ট্র ক্ষমতায় থাকাকালীন অবস্থায় ওসমান হাদিকে হত্যা করা হয়েছে, এই হত্যার দায় আপনারা এড়াতে পারবেন না। আপনাদেরও বিচার হবে। শহীদ ওসমান হাদির গোটা খুনি চক্রকে জাতির সামনে উপস্থাপন করুন। একটা জিনিস আপনারা মনে রাখবেন, বাংলাদেশের জুলাই বিপ্লবের আগে যারা ক্ষমতাধর ছিলেন, যারা রাষ্ট্রকে নিজেদের মনে করতেন, তারা কিন্তু আজকে কেউই বাংলাদেশে নাই।
All right, so another political lot now demanding justice. Adele, what do you make of the threats that are now being issued over there? And we already have a lot of anger brewing within the minorities. Over here, the popular sentiment in India is that what Muhammad Yunus is doing, and by being a mute spectator to this kind of genocide against the Hindus, why shouldn't he be tried by the ICC?
So, thank you for that. Look, there is no doubt in my mind that Yunus should be held responsible for this. But I have to say, this is not different than what happened in Iran with the ousting of the Shah. If you want to talk about it, there were student-led groups with radical Islamic extremist elements with them who worked with the current government there to oust the Shah. And of course, it was the help of the Democrats, who was the previous administration, the same way Democrats pushed out Sheikh Hasina. So of course, the mob didn't kill, basically, this is not about, one man. This is about basically the failure of a man, Muhammad Yunus, to protect the most vulnerable members of his society. And he absolutely needs to be held accountable. And frankly, I think it's the United States' responsibility truly to stand up and to step up. And I'm looking forward to a statement from the President, Commander-in-Chief, to specifically address this issue. On Christmas Eve of all nights should be the most important, powerful day to do it, to be honest with you, to show that the United States truly stands for equality for all. It doesn't matter if you're living in a Muslim majority country, in a Christian majority country, in a whatever majority country, whatever religion you are, whatever faith you follow, you have to be protected. And radical Islamic mob rule should never be allowed to dictate whether someone gets to live or die, not only based on if it's a rumor or not, but based on if they have a different set of ideological values. This is not the American way. This is not the Western way. And I think that if there is no designation of Jamaat-e-Islami and other groups that are 1,000% behind the downfall of Bangladesh, the same way that Afghanistan and Pakistan have been subjected to radical rule, that there's got to be something that has to be done.
Ambassador Sinha, if you go by what Adele is stating, she's made a very interesting point over here by referring to the ouster of the Shah in Iran. We've seen how there's been destabilizing done by, say, Western forces when if they want to prop up someone as a president, it could even be a terrorist, as has been the case in Syria. We've seen how regimes have been changed in South Asia particularly. Do you think these are alarming times for the overall stability of South Asia, all of them impacting India directly if one were to look at what's happened as recently as in Nepal or what's happening in Bangladesh? We cannot discount what's happening at the Durand line between Afghanistan and Pakistan as well.
I think Mr. Zarian made a very interesting comparison with Iran. Of course, I would presume that the United States, Democrats or Republicans, had nothing to do with the ouster of the Shah. Be that as it may, I think as far as encouraging Islamic radicalism, I think the US and the West is squarely responsible, particularly the US in the region, whether it's in Afghanistan, Pakistan. Pakistan is the hub, the center of terrorism, as we all know. Whether it was Iraq, ouster of Saddam Hussein and then the resultant chaos. Libya, we know the chaos is still unfolding. Syria, there's some semblance of, I won't call it normalcy, but authority when a former jihadi has become the president. So I think...
No, but that's what I'm saying. This is the hypocrisy and the double standards of it. When they deem someone fit, it can be a jihadist, it can be a radical, as is also the case in Bangladesh, the free hand that Muhammad Yunus is giving to these radicals to say the Jamaat, an organization that was banned under Sheikh Hasina. But our Sheikh Hasina is suddenly the terrorist who's now under exile in India, according to, say, Muhammad Yunus and all of those who are supporting him at the moment.
Yeah, but to be fair, I think the letter from the congressmen and women, the ranking members of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the House of Representatives.
But is that going to suffice? Is that going to suffice?
No, it's not, because it's too little too late. And especially the fact that they themselves highlight that it has to be free and fair. How can an election be free and fair when the largest political party is banned? If there is a due process of law, if there are people in that party who have committed crimes, then certainly try them properly under what is proper jurisprudence, not in absentia, the way they've done it, not even allowing a defense to be mounted. So I think what you need to really look at is this sham that has sort of been perpetrated in the name of the democracy and elections, because the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, whatever the provocation, I'm not going to go into that, was patently unconstitutional and illegal. The paratrooping of the chief advisor and his advisors, again, people who've been supported and funded by sources that we are all aware of. And now, when there is a sort of a rampage against the minorities and these Islamic forces are holding sway, are ruling, there is very little condemnation. Not only condemnation, surprisingly, there are condolences being extended for the killing of radical leaders, instead of expressing concern for attacks on minorities and killing of Hindus and Christians and Buddhists and even Sufis. So I think this hypocrisy needs to be called out. I think the whole world needs to see where, because I've worked in the UN and observed the UN closely. I know how these special rapporteurs
what are these special rapporteurs doing? In fact, there's not a word that has come in from the UN Human Rights Commissioner so far.
They represent interest groups, so they're not going to be fair.
And they were very quick in coming up with a human rights violation report after what happened in August of 2024. So it's rather surprising and shocking that there's no report with this kind of genocide that's taking place. Shoaib, if you can also give us an idea from ground zero in terms of how these attacks are continuing unabated. Unfortunately, because of the dissent on media in Bangladesh, much of that information is only filtering through unverified sources on social media.
Akanksha, first of all, Bangladeshi media is currently under heavy censorship. Journalists are afraid of telling the truth, number one. Number two, now I was seeing the report in your channel about the death of a person in Dhaka city. I'd like to humbly inform you that I have spoken to the intelligence agencies. They said it was not a Molotov cocktail, it was an improvised explosive device. And they say this kind of device is only used by the jihadist groups. So, and the place they attack is called Media Gali, the media lane, where the journalists, junior reporters, and members of the cultural arena in Dhaka they go for spending time together. So it was a direct attack on the cultural activists and media personnel. We cannot just say it's an isolated incident that there was a Molotov cocktail blast. No, they threw an IED on the media gully, targeting the journalists and members of the cultural arena in Bangladesh. So, Akanksha, in one word, if I want to say, the very identity of Bengalis, the very Bengali identity is under threat, because by the core value of Bengali identity is secularism. We Bengalis, 180 million Bengalis by nature and by culture, we are seculars. And that makes us distinctively different with the Pakistanis. Pakistanis are not secular. And that was the reason that we separated ourselves from Pakistan in 1971. And now this is an attack of Pakistan, of enemies of the war of 1971. America was also against our war. This is an attack on the very identity of Bengalis.
Adele, if I could have quick closing thoughts from you. There's a lot of tit for tat currently happening between New Delhi and Dhaka. This as the Western nations, particularly the United States, of course, France, Germany, as we've discussed, even the EU are only acting as bystanders. What's the role and the need of the hour, especially when it comes to multilateral forums like the UN?
You know, I have to say that the UN has disappointed me in more ways than I can even
Thank you for
count.
saying that.
And thank you. And it's really unfortunate because everyone is by now very well aware of the corruption that happens under that roof that tends to present itself as being the hallmark of democracy and justice. There is no justice. And frankly, I feel very, very ashamed at times that the Cyrus Cylinder, which is the very first ever indication of human rights by King Cyrus the Great, is sitting there in the halls of the UN. And I think there needs to be massive change there. So I think that at this point, it's going to take very courageous leadership to honestly, to bite the bullet, to go against the flow. And this is where you can call them, you know, the people who are the true revolutionaries without being bloody, of course.
I'm running short of time. I need to give quick closing thoughts to Ambassador Sidha as well. Ambassador, tomorrow is when Khaleda Zia's son Tariq Rahman is expected to arrive. Do you think that the BNP could be a game changer in the overall scenario at the moment?
I do. I think that we've seen the BNP.
I'd like Ambassador Sinha also to answer that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, of course.
So I think the two big parties traditionally have been the Awami League and the BNP. And I think in any free or fair election, particularly if the Awami League is not allowed to participate, it should be a cakewalk for the BNP. But given the current circumstances, when the Jamaat-e-Islami and all other Islamic elements are being given, are being encouraged, actively encouraged by the current regime in Dhaka and by their benefactors outside, I think it's difficult to take a call. But certainly with Begum Khalida ailing critically ill, her son will perhaps provide some leadership. Of course, I must add that the son was in exile in the UK for so many years, obviously for crimes that he's been alleged to have committed.
All right, many thanks to you, gentlemen, and Adele for joining in on this discussion here on Brass Tack.